Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to be right back with today's guest, but as always, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, you've heard me say before, these are all companies I used as an athletic director. They're all great companies. You should be using them too. So take 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview, and then go and visit these sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be very glad you did. Here we go. We want to thank Huddle for their support of the podcast. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. Our coaches, our student athletes, and our parents just love the tools, the videos, and the streaming, but there's so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank our friends at Gipper. You know, your students are online, and if they don't see posts on social media celebrating their accomplishments, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. It's used and trusted by over 20,000 high schools and colleges. And whether it's a social media post celebrating a big win or an entire newsletter promoting your program to your community, the Gipper team is going to have you creating world-class content in seconds. It's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to showcase your school's history and your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. We want to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. My assistant AD, along with thousands of others, got his master's at Ohio University, and it was a great experience. It's totally online, very affordable, just 20 months. And while you get your master's, you also complete 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. Go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. We want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. And whether it's more support or more security or more customization, the team at Hometown Ticketing is going to help you create your online ticketing system. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Go to hometownticketing.com. We want to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you will use every single day, whether it's scheduling, rosters, results. Their athlete eligibility and clearance platform alone is gold. To get started, just go to homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast. We also want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. One of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Snap. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can take a look at their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. It's snapraise.com. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of the time it's from a small group that just wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group so you can hear their concerns and probably address them. But they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having that kind of data is incredibly valuable, especially when you're visiting with a frustrated parent, maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to one of our favorite states today, North Carolina, and we're going to be visiting with Joseph Embree. Joseph is a certified master athletic administrator. He's the director of athletics at Southeast Raleigh High School. Of course, that's in Raleigh, North Carolina. Has a tremendous background in sports. We're going to hear about all of that and more. But Joseph Embree, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you, and I appreciate you guys having me.
Well, we appreciate you taking some time out of what's hopefully still vacation for a lot of
Mhm.
us. We're recording this on January 2nd. Joseph is celebrating his Michigan Wolverines victory in their bowl game. I am crying in my Cheerios after the Ducks got their butts whipped last night. But hopefully, it's you're going to be listening to this in a timely manner.
Mhm.
Joseph, let's go and jump right in. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up.
Yeah.
Take us up through your own college days, and then we'll take a
Mhm.
break. But
Okay.
what's the Joe Embree story?
Yeah. So Joe Embree, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, my mom and dad, of course, met each other in college. Father's from Michigan. They decided to move back to Baltimore, where kind of matriculated from there. In high school, I was a three-sport athlete. I did football, track, and also basketball. And I got an opportunity to actually get a scholarship in college. So I went to Bowie State University, which is a smaller HBCU in Bowie, Maryland. And there I played football for 4 years. Um, had a great career, which of course I had a great time doing. I actually started for 4 years. So a lot of my kids, I say, I know I don't look like much, but I wasn't bad then. You may not see it now, but I could play. So I played 4 years, and then from there is where I started to kind of try to figure out what I was going to do from there as far as career wise. Got an opportunity to be an athletic DB coach, at North Carolina Central. And that's kind of how I got to North Carolina. So I coached DBs there for about 3 years. And then from there, we got let go. And I wanted to stay in the area. I met my wife and I wanted to stay. So I got into the school system and started to coach. And that's kind of how it went from there.
I want to hear more about that time as a college coach. I did
Mm-hmm.
that for a few years myself.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to your high school days. You mentioned
Yep.
three sports. I
Mm-hmm.
did the same thing: football,
Right.
basketball, and track. What was your event in track, by the way?
So I did the 4x1 and the 100. I immediately I wasn't in love with track. It's something I did because I was kind of fast, and then of course the football coach kind of pushed. So the 4x1 was kind of like that team aspect and more of an individual sport and track. So I love the 4x1. That was pretty good, and I did well in the 100 also.
Right. I
Mm-hmm.
never had that straight ahead speed. I was a little
Yeah,
tougher. I was a 400 guy,
yeah.
400 hurdles. Um, when you were in high school, obviously I'm a lot older than you are. You're a three sport athlete. Was there
Mm-hmm.
any sort of tug of war with your coaches? Oh, you shouldn't be, playing basketball. You should be, in the weight room lifting for football,
Right,
or you shouldn't be playing football. You got a great
right.
future in basketball. Was there any of that?
In the early 2000s, when I went to high school, it was more common, in my opinion, to do more than one sport. I think nowadays it's more of an individual sport thing. Kids are just focusing on one sport. They have trainers, etc. In the early 2000s, I'm not saying we didn't have those trainers and resources, but it's not the same. So my coaches back then would push us doing different sports. They felt like they correlated with each other and they would help us moving forward. So we were always pushed to do more than one sport when I was in high school.
Oh no, absolutely. And I hope that pendulum is still swinging back in that direction. You
Mm-hmm.
know this as an athlete and as a coach that those trainers, those one sport trainers, they can
Mm-hmm.
certainly work on whatever that aspect is, but the one thing they can't provide is that competition. Okay,
Correct.
competition in track, competition in basketball. They say basketball is a non-contact sport. Well, I was a high school referee for many
Mm-hmm.
years. There's some contact in there. So again, yeah, let's see that multi-sport pendulum swing back.
With you.
um, Making the transition from high school to college. You
Yes.
mentioned, you were able to start for 4 years.
Mhm.
What was that like coming in? Was it kind of eyes wide open, or did you have some confidence? Hey, I can play with these guys.
I wish I could tell you it was the latter, but it was an eyes wide open experience. I did not know, what my place was. I was on scholarship. I was a part of that class that came in, but I just didn't know. Somebody who was a smaller guy, I went to my visits and I went to the games and I seen all these big guys running real fast. I'm like, I'm not quite sure where I can fit in. But when I got there, I always wanted to go to college. My parents always pushed me going to college, so I knew that I was a college guy, if that makes sense. So I was one of the guys in the class who wasn't the most physically gifted, but I was a college guy. I was going to go to class. I was going to go on time. I had the grades. I had a good foundation, good parents. So I know that I was going to at least stick around. So when I got there in the summer, I started with most of the freshmen on third team, but slowly but surely I kind of chipped away. And before you know it, I had an opportunity to play in some games. I did not start that first game necessarily, but when the opportunity arose, I was there. And that's just coming from working hard, being present, and always kind of being around. I was always the first person in the meeting and the last to leave. So where I couldn't do it physically, I did it mentally, if that makes sense, and it paid off. And one of the coaches, we still have a relationship to this day. He coaches for the Vikings now. I got super close with him, and he trusted me because I was a smart kid, and that's how I got on the field a lot faster than maybe some others who were more physically gifted.
No, everything you just mentioned, that's what coaches, they're looking for that. They
Exactly.
want that kid, whether it's a high school kid or a college kid, they want that kid that wants to be there and is doing
Mm-hmm.
all those things right. I think you already answered my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment or maybe a person, junior high, high school, college, that you can look back to and say, hey, that moment or that person is kind of the reason I got on this path of being a coach and an AD? Anybody stick out?
Yep, a couple of people, but Coach Jones, who, like I said, is currently the DB coach for the Vikings, is the first person I said I want to be like him. And what attracted me to him was he was a teacher, not profession wise, but he just taught the game so eloquently that it made me want to teach others the game in a similar fashion that he did. Great communicator, great energy, and a good person. I remember we had my freshman year, we had a project that we had to go to the Library of Congress, which is in DC, not too far from where campus was, but we didn't have cars. And this is a 30-minute ride. How are we going to get there? I need to get this A. And it was some other football guys in the class with me. Guess who took us? It was Coach Jones. All right. We got in his car, took us, showed us around DC, and we learned a lot, and we came back and we got that A. So it wasn't just on the field. Off the field, he was a great person. We would go over his house for dinner, etc. So he would always extend himself. And that's something I try to do now for my student athletes.
Oh, wow. Sounds like a great guy. I'd love to get him
Mm-hmm.
on the podcast, get both of
Yep.
you on at the same time.
Awesome. Mhm.
Let's go and take our first break. For our
Okay.
listeners, we're visiting today with Joseph Embree. He's a longtime coach. He's currently the director of athletics at Southeast Raleigh High School. That's in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're taking that break, but we're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank our good friends at Huddle for their support of the podcast. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches, all of our coaches, just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes loved the videos, and our parents loved the streaming. But there's so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank our friends at Gipper. Your students are on social media, and if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments and promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. It's used and trusted by over 20,000 high school and college programs, and their team is going to have you creating world-class content in seconds. Maybe it's just a social media post celebrating a big win. It can be an entire newsletter to showcase all the great things your program is doing in the community and much, much more. Create, share, and schedule social media in one place. It's professional graphic design made simple. Go to Gipper.com to get started. Don't forget to mention the podcast. That's Gipper.com.
Yep. Gipper and Huddle are two tools that I use, vital tools. Of course, Huddle is more on the coach's side, but I like to say they make it for dummies, if that makes sense. It's so easy to use. Of course, everybody in the county is using it to break down film and transfer film. So it's something that we use in Wake County a lot. Also, Gipper. I actually just published my first newsletter at Southeast using the Gipper tool. Super easy, clarity wise, and I got so much positive feedback. I would like to say I was the first AD at Southeast to do that, to use the tool, Gipper, with utilizing everything. I got great feedback. The information that I use and also the pictures, it was great. So admin actually shouted me out for my first newsletter using Gipper.
Wow, I really appreciate you saying that. And
Mm,
I was going to ask you or to elaborate a little bit, but you did a great job.
mm,
And again, I always like to say it's so easy, even I can
mm.
do it because it is. It's so easy to just create graphics and promos that make your program, look like a Division One program.
Exactly.
And also, thanks for that shout out for Huddle as well.
No problem.
For listeners, once again, our guest today is Joseph Embree. He's a certified master athletic administrator, and he's the director of athletics at Southeast Raleigh High School. Joseph, you mentioned in the last segment that you had an opportunity to go right from college into college coaching. Share a little bit about that, and then take us on the journey that has now brought you to Southeast Raleigh.
Yep. So graduating from Bowie State University, I got an opportunity to be a GA at North Carolina Central University. I was coaching DBs at the time, met a lot of great staff. And I believe that that opportunity at North Carolina Central kind of built a foundation for my work ethic now as an AD. If you know GA, being a graduate assistant, a lot of long hours, a lot of hard work. You basically want a stipend. I moved from Maryland to North Carolina Central. I drove my car, like a 2001 Malibu. All I had was my clothes and a big back TV at the time. We didn't have flat screens. And I showed up on campus the morning of practice. And I was here. And that's kind of how I announced myself. And from there, I learned so many great things. I learned how smart coaches really are. And that their work ethic and how smart they are, it translates into a number of markets. These coaches are not just kind of like the stereotypical dumb jocks. I hate to say it like that, but these guys are really knowledgeable about the game, and they're teachers. And that's one thing I learned. I learned hard work, and I learned how to teach the game. So I did that for 3 years. I was also a video coordinator. So I learned both sides. Um, as we kind of did some things, we got let go. So I was there for 3 years as a GA, and we got let go. So now I'm in North Carolina. I love the state. I'm not quite sure what to do. I know I'm not going back home to my parents' house, and I'm almost finished my master's degree. One thing about some of the credits is they don't transfer everywhere, if that makes sense. I was like a semester. I had one more semester to go, so I wanted to stay. So what I did was I asked if I can basically volunteer in the athletic administration program, and also finish my degree. So I worked in development, which is basically athletic fundraising, while I was finishing my degree, and I worked in that department for about almost a year. So I learned a lot. One thing that I learned, athletic programs can always use more money. That's on a high school level, middle school, or in college. So the development, learning those skill sets and how to talk to stakeholders, how to talk to your population, it was vital. And I did that for about a year. Once I finished that, I got into the school system. I started as a substitute. All right. Then I was a teacher assistant. But I went back to school and I got my teacher's degree in physical education. So now that I'm going through the teacher's program, I'm like, I got to coach some ball, right? So I went to East Chapel Hill. I coached DBs, and I did that for 2 years. So once the coach at East Chapel Hill, who was still one of my mentors today, he left and became the athletic director at Southern Durham, which is about 20 minutes away from East Chapel Hill. When he left, I coached one more year at East. And then he said, you know what you think about coming over here? I could use some help. I can use a assistant AD. So from coaching football, I went to Southern Durham to be the assistant athletic director. Now, mind you, I had my degree in sports administration at the time. So I'm like, I can marry the two. I can be a coach and I can also kind of help out in athletics. And there at Southern High School is where I kind of developed my passion. And I figured out that I want to be a AD one day.
I want to jump in here real quick for our
Mm-hmm.
listeners. Joseph mentioned two things that I just think are just so important that aren't sometimes aren't very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you're a GA, and you
Mm-hmm.
talked about the hard work and the long hours that go with that. It's not just glamour on the sidelines with the headphones and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, learning that craft from let's say from the bottom up, and then also you face that challenge of hey, the no longer going to be involved in football, but got involved in athletics, and you had the opportunity to work in development, which is one of those areas. I know now there's several master's programs in athletic administration that have a development component, but for a lot of people, especially as an undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that just doesn't get covered, or if it's covered, it's just so basic. You had that opportunity to really, take that deep dive.
Yeah.
So good for you to seek out those opportunities. Okay, let's get back to your story. You're assistant athletic director, and you're as we say, drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yes. So it was great as the assistant athletic director. It is something I think if you want to be an AD, if you can start off as a assistant athletic director, that buffer really helps you out. You kind of figure out what you would do if you were the head guy and what you wouldn't do. And that was critical for me. My mentor, Brian Nunn, who was still the athletic director at Southern Durham, he groomed me to eventually take those steps to be the head guy one day. But it started with baby steps. First, he would kind of help me. I would help out with just scheduling and some of just the game day operation stuff. So it started really small. And once he saw me taking those steps, he gave me more opportunities and more responsibilities to move forward. And I learned what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were. Some of my strengths, I was a hard worker. I was going to be there. I was going to be there on time and early. Some of my weaknesses, sometimes I tried to do everything. And that is one thing as a leader, you have to kind of delegate and be a facilitator at times. If you try to do everything in athletics, no matter what level that you're on, eventually it's a possibility that you can burn out, right? So you have to utilize your resources, utilize your staff in order to get these jobs done. So a number of just opportunities and growth that I learned as the assistant director at Southern Durham.
Boy, great points that you brought up, especially the idea of learning to let go, and then right along with that, learning to delegate. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, you understand this. You have a coach, maybe you have an assistant coach that wants to get more involved, wants to stretch their leadership muscles, and you can give them tasks that allow them to grow and also clear your plate a little bit so you can do a better job with some of the things that you just can't delegate. You have to do them as an AD. Great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now you've had some success. You're feeling that you're ready for that next challenge.
Mm-hmm.
What were the circumstances that brought you to Southeast Raleigh as the athletic director? And then we'll cover that in our next segment. But how did that all play out?
So, in speaking with Brian Nunn, who was my mentor once again, I kind of told him that I want to take this step and I want to find a head job as an athletic director. And he said, you know what, I think that you're ready. You've taken those steps forward. I started getting my certifications. I was a CAA at the time, so I was taking those steps. I was learning more. I got a chance to go to our state conference and meet a lot of athletic directors and kind of pick their brains. So I felt that it was time. I got a couple of interviews at some various high schools. My first interview went well. I actually got the job, and I turned it down, which was when I came back and I told my mentor that I turned it down. He's like, we were building up to this. What would make you turn this down? And I just think it wasn't the best fit for me. not just from the athletic standpoint, but from school standpoint, because they go both hand in hand. So I turned that down, and I came back to Southern for another year. I just learned more. Eventually Brian Nunn reached out to the principal at Southeast, where I'm at now. They played college football together at North Carolina Central. And he called and said, you know what, I have a candidate that I think that's worthy. You should give him an opportunity. I've been reaching out to other schools at this time. Got a couple of no's, to be honest with you. Some people wanted athletic directors who had more experience as the head person already. Of course, I had some experience collegiately. I had some experience as an assistant, but some people prefer athletic directors who had more experience, and I understood that. Got on the phone with the principal at Southeast, Principal Eddie Harden, and both of the visions for the program kind of clicked. And he gave me the opportunity, and I've been kind of running with it from there.
Again, another great point, the fit. We talk about finding a fit for kids when they go to college, academics, athletics, big school, small school. And for us as athletic directors, that fit is so, so important. You just can't look at the shiny new toys they might have in the athletic department. You got to look at the school, the community, the staff, who you're going to be working for. Great point.
Yeah.
Let's go and take another break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Joseph to share some of those shiny toys that he has at Southeast Raleigh and talk about some of the things that he's particularly proud of. So let's go and take a break, but we are going to come back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to say thanks to our good friends at Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards, for all the teams, for all the different events, or to show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video consoles. Whether it's a wall mount or a pedestal, they're great ways to showcase your school's history and brag about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast, vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Ohio University and their online master's in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's at Ohio, but my assistant athletic director did, and it was a great experience. It's very affordable, just 20 months, totally online. And while you're earning your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To get more information or get signed up, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. And we want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're the leading digital ticketing provider for schools and colleges. And their team is going to help you create an entire online ticketing system, whether it's more support, more security, or more customization. Hometown is going to help you make the best online ticketing decisions. Hometown Ticketing, it's digital ticketing that offers more. Check them out today.
Really quickly, I want to give you a shout out for your publications. I have the first and second one. I also have the third one on the way. But this is our Bible. So what I realized is we have rules, black and white, from your association that we always utilize. You have your rules, but what you need as an athletic director, and if you're somewhat young in the game, you need more experiences, a compilation of experiences that other athletic directors have used. And I use this book. I'm on the second edition right now, but I use it a lot and just take the best practices. You don't have to do everything everybody says, but you kind of take the advice that they give you, the best practices, and kind of make it your own. And that's what I've been doing since I've been an assistant athletic director. So I just want to give you a shout out and say thank you.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much. That was certainly not needed, but I do appreciate it. On behalf of the many contributors to
Yes.
that book. I throw in my own three tools, of course, but there are
Mhm.
many, many others that make up the toolbox books and your tools that we will get to later today.
Mhm.
Those are actually going to be in the fourth edition, which should be out in time for the NIAAA conference in Tampa. But again,
Nice. Right.
thank you for the shout out, and I'm glad that you found it to be a valuable resource. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go and get back to our visit. Our guest today is Joseph Embree. He is a certified master athletic administrator, and he's the director of athletics at Southeast Raleigh High School. Joseph, you mentioned your journey, how you ended up at Southeast. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Mhm.
What are some things that you do with your kids, your coaches, maybe even your parents or facilities
Mhm.
that you're particularly proud of? Maybe these were initiatives that have been in place and you've continued them, or maybe
Mhm.
it's something brand new that you brought to the school. So this is your chance to brag a little bit.
Right. So the first thing I do, and I made sure I utilize this is I create relationships with my student athletes, my coaches, and my parents. For example, I always ask them how they're doing first before we get to any order of business or anything like that. I always just ask, "How are you doing?" I developed those relationships, and I found out that they'll open up to you more, and you'll have a better working relationship or parent student athlete relationship if you just ask them, "How are you doing?" All right, that's one thing that's been amazing for me. Also, we so Booster Club was a point of emphasis when I came in. My Booster Club was going through some changes. Um, just wasn't that great at the time. I kind of revamped the Booster Club, and now a lot of our initiatives that we have, I create with the Booster Club, and we're doing a lot of community service. So Booster Club, of course, is about giving, it's about development, but also uh, in creating those relationships, we're doing more community service and we're bringing in our student athletes. So I have basically a community group off the Booster Club and off our student athletes, and we're doing community service for the Southeast Raleigh area. That's something that was new that I kind of got from my previous school, but I want to continue to develop.
Now, boosters is one of those topics that there's a lot of different ways to operate a booster
Yeah.
club.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you do it at your school? Are you like, does the booster club, do they make recommendations? We'd like to do this, or do they, and I'm exaggerating here,
Yeah.
do they just go off on their own and
Right.
they buy things and
Right.
say, here's something for the softball team? How
Mm-hmm.
how do you work with your booster club on how they're going to help the program?
Great question. And this is something that I've learned. I've asked different ADs how they do it before I kind of started mine. We have a working relationship. Um, I do facilitate, so everything kind of goes through me. But it's a working relationship. I can't just ask for a certain amount of money and they just give it to me. They have the right to ask questions. We definitely use a rival rules of order where we kind of vote on certain things. Some things have been a go and some things have been a no based off of our financial um, ability to kind of raise funds. Uh, but I do lead the Booster Club. We do have a president, we have a treasurer, we have different job duties, but it is a working relationship. We kind of need each other in order to kind of move forward and help our athletics department grow.
You know, earlier on, you talked about social media and how you utilize it. Um, was that something that was already in place at Southeast, or did
Mhm.
you bring in just the first time ever with social media, or at least maybe a version of it?
So when I got to Southeast, the individual sports had their own social media. So what I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to marry all of our social medias and have one hub for everybody. I believe the sports should have their own social media because they can post more often, they can post more individually. And sometimes I'm not there. I'm at another sport, so they can kind of post and tell their own stories how I like to tell my sports to do as far as social media. But I wanted one central hub for our student athletes and our students and just the public. So they know I can go on Southeast social media And then from there, I can also find the football team, the basketball team, the baseball team, whatever you need. So using Gipper, once again, a lot of social media posts. I want to tell our own story, but in order to do so, we have to give the public the facts. And I use Gipper a lot in order to do so with a lot of the visuals, a lot of the data, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, I think you mentioned, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot
Mhm.
here, that you use their newsletter platform.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Again, that wasn't available when I was an athletic
Right. Right.
director, and I'm
Mhm.
ticked off about it.
Yeah.
I've talked to Matthew Glick about that. Anyway, talk a little bit about the newsletter feature for our listeners, because again,
Mhm.
it is such a cool feature.
Yes, it's a very cool feature. This was my first one that I utilized. I've done some newsletters kind of previously, kind of using my own tools, but Gipper makes it so easy where it basically gives you a format. It gives you the template. All you got to basically do is kind of punch in your own pictures and then fill out the information. So I did a end of fall, beginning of winter wrap up, basically, using the newsletter tool. And I basically told my stakeholders, uh, teachers, the community, um, this is how the fall wrapped up. We went 7-4 in football, et cetera, et cetera. And I also labeled and I put in everybody who made the all conference team. So it was everybody who made an award, how we finished, and then moving forward from the fall, this is how we're going to start the winter. So I put towards the bottom, I talked about wrestling, basketball, and how we're going to move forward from the fall to the winter using the newsletter. I sent it out to the Booster Club, alumni, teachers groups, and of course the student athletes, and they raved about it. Like I said, I'm not quite sure what the previous AD did, but using Gipper, it made it super duper easy. So for each season, I'm going to do a newsletter, kind of wrapping up one season and starting a new one, just so you can get it out to everybody. Some people are big social media folks, some people are not, but newsletters definitely in our space is a big hit.
Oh no, and again, I always make the point, people in your community, they're going to
Mhm.
talk about your program one way or another.
Right.
And the newsletter is a great way to give them talking points about all the great things your kids, your coaches, and oh, by the way, you as an AD are doing.
Totally
Um,
agree.
Joseph, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast,
Okay.
but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more about how you run things at your school, or just add you to their network, and
Okay.
sounds like you got a great resource here. What's the best way they can get a hold of Joseph Embree?
You can email me at jembree, that's JEMBREE at WCPSS.net. That is my email. Please reach out. And I always try to respond within 24 hours, just like student athletes and parents. Reach out to me that way, and then we can kind of connect through social media, Twitter, etc.
Okay. If you have those social media addresses at your fingertips, we can
Yep.
add those too.
All right. So hold on, making sure my personal is at Embry Joe on Twitter or X. I'm not quite sure which one we're calling it now. But that is my personal, which I just put basic facts about sports and stuff like that. Feel free to DM me, reach out, and then I'll definitely reach out also.
All
All right.
right. Very good. Okay.
Mhm.
We are visiting with Joe Embree from Southeast Raleigh High School. We're going to take another break. I know that's shocking to our regular listeners, but there's a lot more coming, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to say thank you to Home Campus for their support of the podcast. You know, Home Campus is one of those platforms that you're going to use every single day, whether it's scheduling, rosters, results, communication. Their athletic eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. To find out more, just go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com. You're going to be very glad you did. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. We use it for home games, of course, but we also use it for pep rallies. We use it for signing ceremonies. It's tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to thank Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. It's snapraise.com. Welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast. Joseph, you mentioned in one of the earlier segments, you got involved with your state association, you got on that path. I think it's important for our listeners, particularly, maybe those new to the profession or younger, to hear about the journey that we take, not just with our state association, but with the NIAAA. So tell our listeners, how'd you first get started attending your state conference and talk about taking some of those early LTC courses?
Yep. So when I was the assistant athletic director at Southern Durham, I spoke with our district athletic director, kind of told him what I wanted to do, asked him basically, how do I get there? He said, well, if you want to make yourself more marketable, but you want to learn the foundations of being an athletic director, you need to, of course, register with an NIAAA and start to take some of these foundational courses and get certified. So that's what I did. Also, in speaking with Brian Nunn, he said, I'm taking my certifications too. Well, let's kind of take this journey together. So I got registered with the NIAAA, and I started to work towards my CAA, just being a certified athletic administrator. And you have to take these courses. The courses are really, really good, that they're online, which is great. So they're super duper accessible. So I started to do that. So I took the foundational courses. First one being LTC 501, Guiding the Foundation, and Philosophies. That was like the foundation of what I started to put together in my playbook, as I call it. That course gave me my foundation that I still utilize today. If I was the athletic director, I used to think, what would I do? And these courses kind of answered my questions, almost like checkbox. So I took all the foundational courses, all the 500 courses, and they were great. Some of them here are talk about organizational management. Whatever you do in athletics, you have to be organized. It talked about legal issues, talked about Title IX, talked about hazing. So all the foundation that you need in order to be an athletic director started with those LTC courses. I learned so much. And they actually give you the resources that I still utilize to the day. I have them saved, so I just kind of go through them. And if I have a question, I look through those resources. So it's a great foundation to have. And I met a lot of district athletic directors and other athletic directors taking these courses with us, because some of the courses are interactive. So you meet online and we kind of brainstorm utilizing these courses during the courses. I actually met my current district athletic director during COVID. He was teaching one of the courses. So it's kind of a full circle now that we kind of work together a lot. But the first time I met him was during one of the LTC classes. So those courses are great. And I utilize them mostly online. I did take a couple in-person courses during my state association meetings. Then moving from there, I kind of started my CMAA foundation courses also.
Now, as you started to take those courses, typically it's one of two responses, and sometimes both.
Yeah.
Was it, oh my goodness, this is great stuff, I need to bring it back to my school? Or was it, oh my goodness, we're not doing this, we're going to be in trouble? Which one was it for you?
I hate to say it, but it's a bit of both, because it's so much information that it's like, wow, it can be intimidating at first, but they start to break it down and you realize that you're taking these resources with you. You don't have to memorize it all in one at one time, if that makes sense, because you use it as you kind of matriculate and you go on. So it was a bit of both. I did implement a number of the best practices that I learned during these foundation classes when I went back to campus. So it was a bit intimidating at first, but the information was definitely valued and needed.
Now, I know, Roy Turner does a great job with the North Carolina Association. I was actually very fortunate to speak at their conference a
Yep.
few years ago.
Mhm.
Have you started teaching LTI courses yourself at
Mhm.
the North Carolina conference?
Not yet. That is my next step, which I'm looking forward to. I wanted to make sure this first year I kind of just be a sponge. I know I have the foundation, I have the courses, but I wanted to be a sponge my first year being the athletic director of my own school. My next step is to start to teach some of these courses.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. And again, for our listeners too, make sure you take the 790 course
Mhm.
either at your state or at the national level. That's the course that allows you to become a teacher and
Right.
hopefully get involved at the national level too.
Correct.
Well, Joseph, this has just been so cool getting to know you. Thanks for sharing some of your holiday vacation with us. But we're not done yet.
Mhm.
We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. And those tool suggestions that you've already shared go into our toolbox books. Um, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, I'm going to ask you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 items in the toolbox. So
Okay.
let's go and hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we return, we're going to see what Joseph Embree is going to put in his new athletic director toolbox. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group so you can hear their concerns and hopefully address them. But they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having that kind of data is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Hey, before we get to the toolbox, I didn't give Joseph an opportunity to talk about his CMAA project. So shame on me. Joseph, share with our listeners, how did your project come together?
Gotcha. So for my CMAA project, I actually utilized something that I started when I got my master's in sports administration. So for my thesis, I created a program to help minorities swim. So for my CMAA project, I kind of added on to what I started in my master's program. So I took that learn to swim program and I made it more comparable for students at Southeast Raleigh. Um, and we are creating a learn to swim program that, in correlation, is going to help our swim and dive team um, get more people to come out. Southeast Raleigh, we do have a swim and dive team, but we've only had historically maybe at most 6 to 7 student athletes actually participate. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take that learn to swim program. If we can teach our student athletes how to swim at Southeast Raleigh, then we can grow our swim and dive program. And I want to max out 30, 40 swimmers if I could. Now, that may be unrealistic, but the more we teach our student athletes how to swim, I think we'll be able to field more swimmers and divers at Southeast. So I took that program, How to Learn to Swim, and I kind of created a map and a foundation to continue to pour into our swim and dive aquatics program at Southeast.
Wow, what a great what a great project. And I'm going to guess it's still ongoing and you're continuing to build, let's say, gather data each year.
Correct. We're implementing it as we speak. I got with my swim and dive coach who had eerily similar idea. So we kind of use my project as a blueprint, and we're taking these steps forward as we speak.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm excited to see how that grows, down the road. Very cool. Well, hey, let's go ahead and take a peek into the toolbox. Again, for listeners, if you're new to the show, we ask athletic directors to send out a brand new AD on their first job, but we only let them put three things in the toolbox. So, Joseph, what three items are going to go into your new
So,
athletic director toolbox?
yep. My first one actually I got from the book, but I utilize now. It's write it down. That is the first tool that I utilize. We have because we're in the technology era, as I like to say. We tend to put things all on computer, but for me, my learning style, I have to write it down. So one thing I do is as soon as I come in, I write down what I need to do, and I color coordinate it for severity. If something I have to do goes in red, and something I want to get done goes more in green, and then as I go day to day or during the day, I kind of check those things off. It makes me feel accomplished when I can get all of them done. But writing it down allows me not to forget because one thing you're being pulled in different directions as the day goes on. And without me being able to write it down, I know that I would probably miss something. So writing it down, write the goals down and what you have to do day to day helps me a lot. So that is the very first thing I do. Write it down. All right. The second one, and this is something that I kind of the foundation was in the book, but I kind of created my own. Hire people that are going to highlight or kind of help you with some of your weaknesses. That is something hiring, of course, good coaches, that's a must. We know that. But don't be scared to hire somebody that's going to help you out with something that you may not be as good at. For me, creating budgets wasn't my strength. So I got somebody who the budget was their strength. Now I'm somewhat frugal, so not spending any money is easy to do, but creating that budget where you can kind of plan out where you want to be at towards the end of spring season is something that is super important. So make sure you hire somebody who has the strengths that may be your weaknesses, and that's okay. Sometimes they may challenge you, but it will make you a better leader moving forward, in my opinion. Right. The last one is give yourself grace. That is something that I got from the book, but as soon as I read it, any athletic director that is getting in the game and doing this profession, you have to give yourself grace. We all want to be the best. I want to be the best athletic director for my student athletes in my school, but I've learned that I have to give myself grace. Sometimes if I miss a deadline or I want to be here, but our accountant's here, wherever it may be, it is okay to give yourself grace and give yourself time. Rome was not built in a day. And sometimes you have to give yourself time in order to accomplish some of your goals. And also, don't be scared to fail. All right. That was one of my biggest worries. If I come in and if I mess something up, I do something wrong, how will the general public look at me? How will some of the coaches that or admin look at me if I fail? And it is going to happen. It may not be a big failure. Hopefully, it won't be, right? But sometimes you're going to fall a little short, and you have to be okay with that. You have to get up the next day, take it day by day, and try to conquer some of those goals as you move forward. So give yourself grace and understand if things don't happen the way you want them to happen, all right, it's going to be okay. You still have another day to, as I like to say, compete and make it better. So those are the three things that I truly utilize to this day and will continue to utilize. That is what the three tools that I would give to a new AD.
Well, I just love them. And again, the last one you mentioned, it's one of those things. I remember being that way just coming out. I didn't want to admit that
Yeah.
I didn't know everything. I was afraid
Mm-hmm.
to ask people for help because I didn't want to appear like I was a dope, and I was a
Yeah.
dope for not asking people. So, and again, giving yourself grace. Certainly, we should give others grace, but
Right.
we realize as we get into this profession that that's how kids grow. That's how we grow, because, okay, this didn't work out. Let's try it a different way. And absolutely, writing things down, documenting things. Great, great tips for any AD, new or veteran.
Correct.
Joseph, this has just been so cool spending time with you. We're going to have to get you back on the podcast. But
Anytime.
if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and connect with you right now, what's the best way that they can do that?
Once again, you can email me at jembree, that's JEMBREE at WCPSS.net. That's my email. Once again, I try to respond within 24 hours and also on Twitter or X. That is at Embree, EMBREE, Joe @ Okay. That is on Twitter. DM me at any time. Try to pick my brain. And once again, I try to pick everybody's brain. So if you have questions for me, understand that I'm going to have some questions for you just so I can continue to grow and get better in this space.
Well, thanks again for sharing with our listeners. All the best moving forward as we get ramped up into 2025. And we'll look forward to connecting with you again down the road.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on your platform.
For our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of every interview to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, try to share stories and best practices. So hopefully you'll come back and join us again on the next episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks again.